Welcome to the NWI.com Political Roundtable. For Thursday, October 10th, I'm Robert Blaszkiewicz, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Join with me today, Crista Zivanovic, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times, and Times Editorial Page Editor, Doug Ross. A lot to get to, so we're going to jump right in. Day 10 of this government shutdown and the looming bigger crisis of the debt ceiling. It seems that there is some movement, a possible deal for maybe what looks like a short-term fix, where there would be a short-term raising of the debt ceiling and then negotiations to follow. It seems like this is just kind of kicking the can down the road, and in maybe a month and a half, we'll be in exactly the same kind of crisis mode that we're at now. Where does this go?
It goes exactly where you said. You know, it goes to Thanksgiving, and Black Friday will be not Black Friday because of sales, but Black Friday because of the debt crisis again. And, you know, boy, if you want to talk about a way to, you know, put pressure on consumer lack of confidence, you know, that would do it right there. That's like the most crucial day for retail.
And not just consumer lack of confidence. Equities markets, they jumped. The Dow ended 319 points higher today because there's a deal in sight. People are feeling some relief. But even globally, is China and other Asian nations who buy our treasury bonds, how long are they going to put up with this dysfunction? I mean, are they going to finally decide that the sun is finally setting on the great empire and say, forget it, we're going to find investment opportunities elsewhere in Africa, in Latin America? There are other areas of the world that are ripe for investment now, and you know, that's a big concern of mine. And the other thing that I think we need to keep in mind is, are the Republicans going to be able to get their act together in a month and repair their dysfunction and their disarray? Because there is a deep divide, and I think we saw it. And are the sensible people in that party going to be able to tell the other people who are saying nothing's going to happen if we default? Are they going to be able to convince those people to make nice and start really talking to one another again and act like a democracy?
Yeah, and I'm not sure I see on the Republican side how they're going, what the end game is here. It seems like
precisely
they're
well
kind of
put.
making
That's
it
what
up
I
as
was
they go
trying
along.
to say. Yes,
and we're seeing the impact of it in polling. Gallup just came out with a poll for the last 20 plus years. They've polled approval ratings for the parties. The Republicans are 28% approval rating, which is the lowest in the history of the poll.
And that's terrible. I mean, you know, I've seen numbers, you know, different organizations are saying, you know, 5% approval rating. I mean, Associated Press. You know, it's just terrible. Meanwhile, you know, while we've got the shutdown, IUN, Indiana University Northwest, I should say, economist Micah Bell was saying today that here's what the shutdown is costing our economy is $12.5 million an hour. He figures that that's about $160 million to $300 million a day hit on our economy. He calculates it at 0.2% of the GDP. So, I mean, you know, we're seeing the drag, we're seeing the evidence.
And that is that both local and national as far as people not spending money and...
Right. I mean, you know, well, you know, if you don't have the income because, you know, you're laid off essentially from the federal government, yes, you'll get the money at some point in the future. But if you don't have it when you need to pay your bills, you're not shopping.
He makes an excellent point because both the NFIB and the National Chamber of Commerce, who are usually staunch Republican allies, were both begging the Republican Party to stop this nonsense for that very reason, that the small businesses that rely on people middle America, who don't make that much money, they rely on middle America to come to their restaurants, come to their stores, buy tires. You know, I mean, just the Main Street economy also was in danger of going kaputski soon.
Well, and you know, you're also looking at people that have put out the money for products that they've sold to the government, and the government hasn't written the check yet. You know, well, they're already out the money, but they don't have the revenue.
And the people who hold the treasury bonds, they're not just Asia and China. They are pension plans in this country that rely on retirees who rely on that money coming in to spend and stimulate the economy.
Right.
Well, part of all this budget battle has been Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act and the Republican attempts to defund it or to delay it. And here in Indiana, on another front, the Attorney General kind of is continuing his war to thwart portions of Obamacare, filing suit about the employer mandate, seeking to exclude government from that employer mandate,
including school districts.
Right,
and that's the key. I was at a school board meeting a few weeks ago at which that subject came up, and they're like, what have we got to lose? If we sign on, maybe we do, maybe we don't. They hadn't made a decision before the suit was filed, but that was the attitude going into it. It didn't seem to be that much of a we feel really passionate about that as much as what the heck, it's found money if if it goes through.
If it fails.
So exactly, if the suit wins, and so. Boy, I
it's
see
an
that as a
interesting point of
partisan
law. It's something that was being shopped around by this Kukulski. Forgive me if I've misnamed the guy's name, but the state attorney general has hired him for $20,000 to help with this lawsuit over the next 10 months. There's just two thoughts I had that I just want to get out there. Number one, this Obamacare law originated in Massachusetts, where it seems to be doing well. I just want to remind everyone, it was the brainchild of a Republican governor, Mitt Romney. And secondly, my concern through all of this has been that Obamacare is the law of the land. It might be a terrible law, and we might have to change it as it goes forward. But my concern for the democracy was we really gave our Democratic state legislators a hard time, and justifiably so a few years ago when they walked out because they didn't want to pass a law. They didn't want to vote on something they knew was a fait accompli, the right to work law. And we were concerned about democracy then, and I think we should be concerned about it equally now that the Republicans are trying to renege on a law that's a law of the land and that the Supreme Court deemed valid and legal. So I just wanted to get that out there and remind readers about those crucial and valid points. It's the law of the land. What are we going to do next time we have a Democratic president? Are we going to try and reverse the Civil Rights Act of 1964? And I'm not being facetious here. I'm being very serious.
And it's a law about getting uninsured access to insurance. And the one thing I don't hear on the other side is, okay, what is the alternative to get the uninsured insured?
And this is something that's been talked about for decades. I mean,
since Harry Truman. Harry Truman tried to get a single-payer national health care law in place, and was dissed for being a socialist.
So we have a law in place. We still have a lot of people who are falling through the gaps. We're, seeing, it's
300,000 in Indiana.
Well, exactly. And if you want to improve the law, you're going to do a lot of different things to make, for instance, you can simply pass the same kind of caps on medical malpractice lawsuits, the same kind of caps Indiana has. You can,
right. There are ways to tweak it and improve it.
Cross-state competition. You can do that.
Right.
But if you're fighting it, you're not accomplishing any of that. So this is where we need the moderates.
But when you
to
have people like Representative Rokita, and all due respect to him, I think he cares passionately and has valid points. But when you say this is the worst law known to humanity, well, it was put in place originally at the state level by Republicans. So, let's put our heads back on straight and start acting like a democracy and having some give and take and putting ideas in the open marketplace. And when one wins and becomes law, move on.
And we should say
tweak
Rokita,
the law subsequently.
we should say, on Rokita's behalf, he did file lawsuit, or not lawsuit. I'm thinking, of course, of our Attorney General. He's filed legislation that would make gradual, changes to, improve, address this, but then the gradual changes and mean immediate changes to what's already been accomplished, and so, that's not the way to do it.
Yeah. Well, shifting gears, the Illiana Expressway, long debated, and it hit an obstacle yesterday when the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning voted on its 2040 plan, basically a long-range transportation plan, and whether to include the Illiana Expressway in it, and voted. This committee voted 10-4 against including the Illiana in their plan. A major blow to the efforts to build the expressway. Where do you see this going? Is it a fatal blow, or what has to be done to overcome
it? To go forward, the Illiana has to, and we're calling it an expressway, acknowledging that it would be a tollway. Freeway, is
semantics,
different, exactly.
Schmantics.
So it's still an expressway, no matter how it. But anyway, the Illiana would have to be approved by the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission. That's NERPC, if you don't know, and the CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, has the vote was the full board, and that's separate. Unlike in Indiana, that's separate from the Metropolitan Planning Organization, that is the real decider for funding. So CMAP has its own MPO. So it's to this group of people that has the final vote, and that's the real yay or nay. I mean, NERPC has to vote, obviously, assuming CMAP approves it, the MPO. So it's still kind of up in the air, on the ropes, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it, but it seemed like not such a good.
Well, Rahm Emanuel's against it. The Chicago interests, because they see it as competing against, Chicago. If you put the money in
traffic out away from Cook County, basically.
Exactly, and that's that's what Daniel Burnham was saying in his plan of Chicago, 100 and some years ago, was, let's create these outer rings around here to facilitate commerce in the suburbs and so forth. And
I don't know if nixing the Illiana is going to stop that, though, because those suburbs are still growing. And
well, what you're going to do is you're going to see the same amount of traffic, but you're going to see it on roads that, truck traffic in particular,
that's a good
that
point.
shouldn't. I mean, look at Highway 30. I drive that, every day, and I see ruts in it that, come from overweight trucks that are, just beating that pavement to death, and it's, too much volume. It needs to be siphoned off and put onto a new road.
Yeah. Before we end today's show, talk about a little bit, Crista, about the protests that happened at the Lake Ridge schools today, an informational picket by teachers, kind of upset with their lot, and kind of the bigger picture of what's going on.
I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. We'll be really quick and wrap up soon, but the Lake Ridge Teachers Union protested this morning with honks and support from parents. They're very concerned because they have not had a raise in 8 years, and now those who live in Lake County will be having a bigger chunk, 1.5%, taken out of their paychecks. And now they're being expected, they claim, to take a 3% pay cut that they were not allowed to negotiate. And they're very concerned. They said that they have taken on a lot more responsibilities. They're now a new tech college. They are being held accountable, which they don't seem to complain about, but they feel like they are giving more and yet getting less. And I just wanted to point out that I think they're a less rich school district in Northwest Indiana, and I think this is the beginning of a wave of teacher backlash. I think they feel like they have been disrespected for several years now with some of the legislation that's been passed, with school vouchers and the growth in public charter schools, which are allowed to have great more freedom in hiring teachers and administering and planning curriculum. And it comes on the heels of a story we had today. Raymond Golars, who used to be a Hobart School Administrator and a Hammond School Administrator, who now lives in Bloomington, and he's on a state committee looking at education policy in the state and the travels he's done. And he said the same thing, that teachers are really tired of being disrespected and dissed. So I think these two things are just a trend that we're beginning to see, and I wanted to point it out.
You could say we began to see it last fall when Tony Bennett got ousted.
Oh,
well,
absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point.
Good point.
Exactly. I mean, I couldn't go in any single school without hearing teachers talking about this, and I was in a number of schools last fall, and boy, everywhere they were talking about it. So I think you'll be hearing a lot more. The one thing is Indiana does have a glut of teachers because there have been so many that have been, laid off over the years, and so many more trained than were hired. So, that's going to be logically depressing wages,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back next week with another Political Roundtable.